All right, we're going to do business costs. So at the end of this, you're going to be able to understand the meaning of various types of business costs, explain how the law of diminishing returns causes variable costs to grow at higher output levels, and you're going to be able to calculate the total cost, marginal cost, and average cost. So the law of diminishing returns. We didn't do the warm activity, but it demonstrates that there will eventually be diminishing returns to an input, such as labor. Adding more of input will at some point yield a decreasing marginal product, all things being equal. So that means no matter what you put in, at some point, you're going to be losing money. Marginal product, which is just the next product that you make, it's one extra product, can become negative, which means total production has decreased. Diminishing returns may happen because of organizational difficulties or space restrictions. Variable costs. This is a cost that depends on the quantity of output or the quantity of products that are produced. Variable costs include such things as labor and raw materials, because you might need more people, you might need less people. And if you're baking cakes, for instance, if you bake one, you're going to need one cake mix. If you bake two, you're going to need two cake mixes. So your raw materials, the products that you need to make your final product, you're going to need more of that the more products that you make. Variable costs always rise as the output increases. You're always going to need more products the more products that you make. You're always going to need more people the more products that you make. So we find our average variable costs by dividing the cost by the output. So we have our formula here. So we're going to have a couple formulas. So what I'm going to do is I have a Word document open, and I'm going to note what my formula is. This is variable cost divided by the quantity. Because of the law of diminishing returns, the average variable cost will eventually begin to increase. So because of the law of diminishing returns, the more product that you make, the more cost you're going to have, because it just makes sense. The more cakes you bake, the more eggs you're going to need, the more cake mixes, the more flour, the more sugar. You're just going to need more products that go into that final product. Then you also have your fixed costs. This is a cost that does not depend on the quantity of output. That is, so it doesn't depend on the amount of products that you're making to sell. Fixed costs include such things as rent or insurance payments. Those are the things that are the same price every month. Fixed costs stay the same even if your output increases. So just because you're baking more cakes, the place that you rent is not going to charge more. The average fixed cost is fixed cost divided by output. So here is another formula to put into our chart. So we got average fixed costs, equals fixed cost divided by quantity. Because fixed costs are always the same, the average fixed cost decreases as your output increases. So that means that over the amount of products that you're making, you're going to divide it less because you're making more products. So the more products can cover your costs. Then you have your total cost. To find the total cost for a business, you add together your variable cost and your fixed cost. Total cost is what you really want to focus on if you're running a business, because that's how much it costs to run your business. So we have another formula here. We have total cost equals variable cost plus fixed cost. So the average total cost is total cost divided by the output. So let's go and add that back into our formula chart. So average total cost equals, was that total cost divided by quantity? The average total cost usually falls at first and then eventually starts increasing because that variable cost starts increasing. The lowest point on the average total cost line is the minimum cost output. So that's where you're making the most money because your product is covering your costs and it doesn't cost you more to make more product. The marginal cost is the change in total cost caused by producing one more unit. So if you bake on average 10 cakes a week to sell, and you're wondering, what if I bake 11 cakes? Would I actually make more money or would I lose money buying my raw materials? So that's what finding the marginal cost, the purpose of finding the marginal cost. So you find the marginal cost by dividing the change in total cost by the change in output. And that will make more sense when we get to the activity. So marginal cost equals the change in total cost divided by the change in quantity. So you see the change in our total cost in this example, it stays the same. We're going up by tens. Normally it's easiest to make the change in quantity equal to 1. So that's what that triangle means, is change in. Marginal cost always intersects the average total cost at its minimum. This is true because any individual value below an average will decrease it, and vice versa. We're back to the short run versus the long run. As you may have guessed, costs are different in the long run when compared to the short run because all costs are variable in the long run, because every year you sign a new rent agreement. So your rent might go up, it might decrease. Every year, possibly your utility bill will go up or your cell phone bill will change. So in the long run, over a longer period of time, your numbers are going to shift. In the short run, though, in that 1 year before you get that change, your total or your fixed costs, they're going to be fixed. So by adding more fixed costs, such as machines, a firm can reduce their average total cost at a higher output. At each level of fixed cost, a firm has a different short-run average total cost. The minimums of each short-run average total cost can make up the long-run average total cost. Economies of scale are when the long-run average total cost, that's LRATC, long-run average total cost, falls. And diseconomies of scale are when it rises. So now you should be able to understand the meaning of various types of business costs, explain how the law of diminishing returns causes variable costs to grow at higher output levels, and we're going to be able to calculate the total cost, the marginal cost, and the average cost. So let's look at our class activity. So I have it pulled up here. So we've started a wedding cake company. So a wedding cake company lists the following items as costs. It says identify whether each expense is a fixed cost or a variable cost, and then we're going to rewrite each expense in the column on this table. So this table right here. So sugar, well, that's a variable cost because that's something that you need depending on the number of cakes we're going to bake. So that's a variable cost. So we're going to put that in the variable cost column. And that's $5 per cake. Expense, rent. So rent, that stays the same. So that's going to be $15. Let me write rent. $15. Flour, that goes into a cake. So it's $2 per cake. So flour, so it depends on how many cakes we're baking. Wages, $10 per person. So wages is going to go into our variable column because we might need more than one person. to help us bake these cakes. Upkeeps on the oven, that stays the same no matter how many cakes we bake. So that's $10. Insurance payments, that stays the same no matter how many cakes we bake. I'm going to say insurance, and that is $5. Transportation fees, that's per cake apparently. So that depends on how many cakes we bake. So if we don't, it depends on how many cakes we're transporting. So I'm going to put transport, and that's $25 a cake. And the last one we have is property taxes, and that does not depend on how many cakes we're baking. So now we have our fixed costs. These are all the things that stay the same no matter how many products we make. And these are all the things that go into making our products when our variable costs. So now it says, use the data from the amount column to fill out the table below. Suppose it takes 2 people to make 1 cake. So we have to pay attention to that, because where it says wages, it's $10 per person. So 1 cake is going to be $20 because it takes 2 people. It takes 3 people to make 2 cakes, 5 people to make 3 cakes, and 8 people to make 4 cakes. So use a calculator to find the average fixed costs, average variable costs, and average total costs. So that's where this little chart's going to come in handy. Oops, wrong one. So our fixed costs. So we find our fixed costs by adding all these up. So for fixed costs, remember that they're the same no matter how many cakes we bake. So let me pull up my calculator. Oh, I don't have one there. So let's see. We have 15 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5. So that's 15, 10, 5, and 5. So we add all those together and we get 35. So our fixed cost is 35, and that's going to be 35 all the way down, because it doesn't matter how many cakes we bake, because it's a fixed cost. That cost is always the same no matter how many cakes we bake. Now our variable cost, this is going to depend on the cake, on how many cakes we have. So let me pull back up the calculator. I'm going to clear it. So for 1 cake, we need sugar, flour, and it says it takes 2 people to make 1 cake. So our wages are per person. So since we have 2 people, that's going to be 20, because 10 times 2 is 20. And we have to transport it, so that's another 25. Oops. Plus 25. So that's $52 for variable costs. So now let's keep going. So for 2 cakes, let's see. So down here it says 3 people are needed to make 2 cakes. So for 2 cakes, $5 per cake. So that's going to be 10, because now we have 2 cakes. $2 per cake. That's going to be 4, because now we have 2 cakes. Wages, $10 per person, and it says 3 people to make 2 cakes. So that's going to be $30, because that's 3 people. And then transport, $25 per cake. So 2 cakes, 25 times 2 is 50. So now we're at 94. 94. It's a lot of money for some cakes. Oops, wrong one. Oh my goodness. There we go. All right, so the next one, we're doing 3 cakes. And here it says it takes 5 people to make 3 cakes. So our wages are going to be 50, because it's 5 times 10. So let's clear this out. So we got 3 cakes going. So 3 times 5, because remember it's $5 per cake. That's 15. Really. Flour is $2 per cake. So we got 3 cakes. So 2 times 3 is 6. Remember, our wages is 50 because it takes 5 people to make 3 cakes. And then we got 3 cakes, so $25 per cake is 75. So that's 146. And then our last cake is 4 cakes. And 4 cakes, it takes 8 people to make 4 cakes. So that's $80 for wages. So we got 4 cakes. So 4 times 5 is 20. 4 times 2 is 8. And here we have 8 people to make 4 cakes. So 10 times 8 is 80. And then 4 cakes times $25 per cake for transport is $100. So that's 208. So our total cost, so looking at our chart, total cost is variable cost plus fixed costs. So that's 35 plus 52, that's going to be 87. 35 plus 94, that's 129. 35 plus 146, that's going to be 181. And 35 plus 208, that's going to be 243. Make sure I'm doing my math right. So now we got to find our average fixed cost. So let's look at our formula chart. Average fixed cost is the fixed cost divided by the quantity. So that's this column right here divided by the quantity. So let's pull back up the calculator. So 35 divided by 1 is 35. 35. Let's see. 35 divided by 2 is 17.5. 35 divided by 3 is 11.6666. So we're going to put 11.7. Oops, there was no point there. There we go, 11.7. And then 35 divided by 4 is 8.75. So now we need to find our average variable costs. So let's look at our chart again. So average variable cost is the variable cost over quantity this time. So let's go back to our chart. So it's going to be this column right here divided by our output over here. So we got 52 divided by 1 is 52. Then we have 94 divided by 2. So 94 divided by 2 is 47. And then 146 divided by 3 is 48.7, rounding. And then, whoops, our last one is 208 divided by 4, and that's 52. Oh, look, the same number to end with that we started with. So now our average total cost, well, if this was fixed cost over output and variable cost over output, I'm betting our average total cost is going to be total cost by output. So let's go check. Average total cost divided by quantity. So we're going to pull this back up. So our total cost for the first one is 87 divided by 1. Well, that stays 87. Any number divided by 1 is this original number. And then 129 divided by 2, 64.5. And then 181 divided by 3 is 60.33, so I'm going to put 60.3. And then we have 243 divided by 4. 60.75. Now we have the majority of our chart filled in. So remember our fixed costs we got from up here. These are the things that stay the same no matter how many products you make. And then we have our variable costs, which we got from up here. And these are things that change the more output, the more products that you make. So we had to go by the number of cakes that we were making. And then your total cost is your fixed cost plus your variable cost. So it's these two columns together. Your average fixed cost is the fixed cost divided by your output or your quantity. Your average variable cost is your variable costs divided by your quantity, your output. And then your average total cost is your total cost divided by your quantity or your output. So now let's find our marginal cost. Remember, our marginal cost is what it costs to make one extra product, to see if it's worth making it, to see if we might make more money. Because everybody wants to make more money, but you don't want to lose money. So we need to figure out if we'll lose money or if we'll make money. So what was our formula for marginal cost? So it's the change in total cost over the change in quantity. Well, what does that mean? All right, let's look at it. So change in total cost. Well, first let's look at the change in quantity. So all you're doing for this is seeing how these numbers change as you go down. So 4 minus 3 is 1, 3 minus 2 is 1, and 2 minus 1 is 1. So your change is 1. Your change from making 3 cakes to 4 cakes was 1. Your change from making 2 cakes to 3 cakes was 1. Your change from making 1 cake to 2 cakes was 1. So that's all that means, is the change in. And so now we do our change in, was it total cost or average cost? It was change in total cost. So that's this column right here. So this is the one we're going to be looking at. So let's see. We're going to start at the bottom. From 243 to 281, what's our change? So let's go back to our calculator. 243 minus 81, 181. That's 62. From here to here, but we can write it here actually. So this is 62. And then from 181 to 129, that's minus, not divide, it's 52. And then from 129 to 87, it's 42. And we're going to leave the top one blank because there's nothing before it. So there's no change. So now let's look. Oh, it doesn't have you graph it. So here on the back part, I'm going to have you guys do this by yourselves. So it already gives you the fixed costs and it already gives you the variable costs. So remember, your total cost is fixed plus variable. Your average fixed cost is your fixed cost column divided by the output. Your average variable cost is the variable cost column divided by your output. Your average total cost is the total cost column divided by your output. And your marginal cost is the change in. So remember up here, we subtracted up. So 243 minus 181, 181 minus 129, and that's what the change is. You divide it by 1 because it goes up by 1. All right, and then once you get these, it tells you to plot the average fixed cost, average variable cost, average total cost, and marginal cost. So all of these are going to be the x-axis. So these are going to be 4 different lines, and this is going to be your y. So you're going to go over whatever these numbers are, and then up 1, and then up 2, and then up 3, up 4. So it's going to be 4 different lines on here, and your cost is going to be your constant y. All right, if you guys have questions, make sure you schedule a meeting with me. Go to the sign up for a help session and get on my schedule. I hope this makes sense.